All right. Hello and welcome to Just Animals podcast. I'm Elle, and with me, as always, is my dad, aka Guy.
Hello, Pod World. How are you? It's been a while.
And today we have a very special guest, Dr. Greg Florant from Colorado, of all places, and his friend, who we'll introduce here in just a second. But I'm going to let Dr. Greg take it away, introduce himself, and tell us about what he does, and his little friend to the right of him.
Yeah.
Okay. So I assume, yeah, we're recording and everything. So yeah, my name is Greg Florant. I've been a professor for about 45 years, actually.
Wow.
I got my undergraduate degree at Cornell and my PhD at Stanford. And while at Stanford, I decided to study marmots as a PhD topic. And after getting my PhD, I did a postdoc in New York City and then took a job at Swarthmore College for about 10 years. And then I worked at Temple University for 5 years. And then I came to Colorado State University in 1994. And I've been teaching and I taught all the way up until about 2021 when I decided to retire. So now I'm an emeritus professor from Colorado State University from the Department of Biology.
Wow,
When
that's
you're in
quite
New
a
York,
history.
that was the wrong type of rodent to be studying because they have different rodents over there. They're pretty big, though.
That's true. In fact, while I was in New York, I actually had to study woodchucks, and they're nasty. You don't want to have to study woodchucks. But I did study woodchucks while I was in New York, up at Montefiore Hospital and Einstein Medical Center, because we were looking at the relationship between fat metabolism and insulin regulation. And these guys have a very interesting, as you might imagine, because they get fat for the winter. Why don't they become diabetic?
Yeah.
Like all humans do, etc. And that's a story we can discuss a little later. But
Absolutely.
yeah, I ended up in a medical school for 2 years as a postdoc, learning more about the biochemistry of insulin regulation.
No
Interesting.
kidding.
Wow.
So,
Go
yeah,
ahead.
yeah, your story is insane. It's like, I mean, what more can we add to your plate here?
I know.
Uh, why marmots? How did you end up with the marmot, or what made you interested in the marmot?
Well, the simple answer is I had to produce a PhD, and
Okay,
so
fair enough.
that's the short answer. The long answer is that I entered the lab. I won a Ford Foundation fellowship, which I should acknowledge
Oh,
right
congratulations.
away. And so Ford was really good at sponsoring my PhD fellowship. And as a Ford fellow, then I had to find a lab to work in. And the lab that I decided to work in was Dr. Craig Heller's lab at Stanford. And Heller worked on ground squirrels, but I decided that I wanted to work on marmots. And at the time, it was unclear whether marmots could actually undergo hibernation because of their size. Uh, Given that the animals usually between oh, 2.5 to 5 kilograms in weight, the question was, would they allow their body temperature to drop to very low levels, close to ambient, and be able to rewarm themselves? And so the actual physics of it was
Right.
an interesting problem. Well, Heller reminded me that in all the years that he had been a professor at Stanford, uh, he had only trapped one marmot every 4 or 5 years. Uh, they were extremely difficult to trap, and he hadn't trapped very many. And so when I said I was going to do my PhD on marmots and follow up on some of the work that he was doing with ground squirrels, he said, "Well, I hope your Ford Fellowship will allow you to go for about 16 or 18 years because you'll need that many years to get the number of marmots just to have a good sample size."
Oh
And
boy.
I, being the brash graduate student that I was at the time, not that I'm not brash now, but certainly then, I said, "Well, that was you, and you are you, and I'm and I think I can trap marmots." So I went out to trap marmots and bring them into the lab, and I didn't catch any the first time I went out, and so there wasn't a smirk on his face. He just kind of, he just kind of, well,
The
I told
silent
you.
"I told you so." The
Right.
silent
Yeah,
"I told you so."
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Kind of look. And I went out the second time, and I tried to trap marmots, and I didn't catch any. And so the third time I went out, and this was up in the Sierras in California. You guys know where that is.
Yeah, I
So,
was about to ask, where in California were you finding marmots?
right, exactly. So we were up in the Sierras, and up at actually near Saddlebag Lake,
Okay.
above Yosemite. And I went out the third time, and I'm sitting in a tent with an undergraduate who was helping me to do my study. And
Mhm.
I said to him, I said, uh, if I was a marmot and I'd been hibernating all winter long and I just woke up, um, I don't want lettuce and carrots and veggie foods. I want
Right.
fat. I want fried chicken. I want
I
I
want
want
some
ice cream.
Popeyes.
Right,
I want stuff
something
like that.
something really
Right,
substantial.
right. Something that's got a lot of fat in it. That's going to help me get my body mass back up again.
Right.
And and I want greasy stuff. So we got up, and the undergraduate didn't know where I was going with this, but I said, we're going to go to the diner. There's a diner up at near Tioga Pass. And so I went up to the diner there, and here's this guy, 6'2" guy, and undergraduate walking in, and black guy goes to the back of the diner to where the cook is, and in those diners they have the greasy grill in the
Oh,
back and
yeah, yeah,
everything.
yeah, the grease pot that they just
Right,
sweep it
and
all into, yes.
you got it. And so I walked back. The people are all in the diner having breakfast and everything, and I said to the cook there, I said, "Can I have that?" It was one of those big MJB coffee cans that they usually scrape all the drippings into.
Right.
Uh, and I said, "Can I have that can?" And of bacon and all kinds of drippings
Right.
from stuff. And the guy looked at me and he said, "Oh yeah, sure, man, you can have it."
Right.
And I said, "Thanks." And the undergraduate was like hiding his head. It was like,
Right,
"Oh
like, "I
my
can't believe
God,
this is happening right now. I don't know
I
this
can't
man."
believe I can't believe that this guy is doing this." And so the cook slides the can to me, and I say, "Thanks very 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 much. I appreciate it." And I took the can. I turned to walk away, and the guy said, wait, a minute." And I said, "What?" And he said, "Please, just don't eat it all in one sitting." I had to laugh, and I said, "No, don't worry, I
It's
won't.
not for me.
That's right, I won't. I won't eat all in one sitting." So we went out, and with some dandelions, for because they were yellow with the color, and I knew that
Mhm.
marmots like dandelions. I soaked the dandelions with the bacon grease and all the fat stuff.
Right.
And long story short, I caught close to 30 marmots that one day. I
Oh my
filled the
god.
Stanford van with marmots, and I came back, and Heller was like, "I can't believe this,"
Right.
and
Like, "Did you go to
so
the zoo and get these? Where did you get
Yeah.
these?"
right, exactly. So that was the first part of my PhD puzzle that I had to solve, was just trapping the animal. So I
Wow.
figured out a really good bait to be used to trap marmots. And everybody loves bacon.
Absol
Right.
absolutely, yes,
So
yes.
you
Can't
know,
go wrong with
uh,
bacon.
yeah, the inside the trap, it really would smell, and the animals would be fighting to get into the trap. They
Oh,
were
I'm
just
sure.
they wanted to be trapped because they wanted that bacon. They wanted to get their fat mass back up again. So needless to say, I had enough marmots to start doing my PhD study, and I did my study with Heller, and got graduated, and I got I published this particular bait, and now marmot, as we call ourselves, marmoteers. We
Marmotiers.
marmoteers all around the world use that bait for trapping marmots because it really works, and it works well for ground squirrels and all kinds of rodents, because particularly in the
Okay.
spring, because they're looking to get
Right.
fat and essential fatty acids back into their body again. So
Right.
I
Wow.
have a more fundamental question for you, which is to
That's
me is
amazing,
very
by the way.
interesting. When you went home and told your family, "I'm going to study marmots," Did they think that you were just nut crazy?
Well, that that's a good question. I come from a very interesting family. Um,
Okay.
my three of my uncles are all scientists, and my
Oh,
Oh,
okay.
father was a scientist at Lockheed Missiles and Space,
Oh,
and my
so
my
science runs in
mother
the
was
family.
a public health nurse, so
okay.
they were very much into science. And
Okay.
so when I came home from school, at, even at Stanford, and I would say things like, "I have to go back to the lab now to do research and do my Marmot stuff." They were encouraging me to go back. They said
Okay.
when I said I had to do an experiment on Christmas morning, they said that's okay. Just when you done with your experiment, come on back and we'll have breakfast ready for you. And I did. There were times when I had to be back in the lab on New Year's Eve or New Year's Day or Christmas Day, and so my family was extremely supportive
Oh, that's
because
awesome.
because they were scientists and had
Right, yeah, so they get it. They understand,
they
you
Yeah.
gotta run
exactly
experience, you gotta rerun it and then rerun it again and then write your report and then
right
change your report and
right exactly. Now my brothers were another story.
oh, that makes sense.
Because they were not scientists. They were not into
Oh.
science.
Oh, fair
So
enough.
every time I got for example, every time I got a NSF grant, they would ask me, what are you going to do with all that money? And and
Yeah.
I'd say, wait a minute, a very, very, very small amount of that money comes to me. All the rest
Right,
goes to the university.
right,
So they had no clue really how science was really working.
right.
Um, but they just knew that Gregory was the mad scientist and doing all this stuff on animals and like that.
That's awesome. That's so cool, and that's great you had parents that fostered that too and that understood, like, I mean, I've some of my bio lab classes when I was in undergrad, I had to go in on the weekend and count fish heartbeats and stuff, so it definitely or well, actually like little fish and like they're still in the eggs and count their little heartbeats. But yeah, that takes some time and having to be go in on a Saturday and a Sunday into your bio lab.
Right, right.
So let
You had to strike while the iron was hot.
yeah.
Yep.
When
Yeah.
the experiments were working, you
Right.
Right.
had to stay in there and make sure
Exactly.
you got all the data. So
Absolutely.
So let's talk about something I'm sure you've looked at, and that is how long is the hibernation period?
okay, so let's let's back up a
Yes.
Okay.
little bit and make some definitions,
Got
Yes,
which
it.
please.
some of
Explain
my
hibernation
right
to us.
some of my colleagues might disagree with me a little bit, but
That's
in general we all do agree about some of these definitions. So hibernation, in my view, is a period of time. So it's time period
Hmm.
over which animals exhibit behavioral and physiological adaptations to survive when food supplies are low or non-existent, and ambient temperature is such that they would increase, they would expend too much energy to be able to survive.
That makes
Okay,
sense.
so
Hmm.
in this case, hibernation is considered a time period which really encompasses winter. So we're talking about from September or so, September, October, all the way until usually March or April. That's the time period when animals hibernate. Okay. Now, when we talk about, well, what is hibernation? Well, hibernation, the characteristics of hibernation, besides occurring during that time period of September, October through till March or April, are that the animal will stop eating or greatly decrease their food intake. And more importantly, they will drop their body temperature to extremely low levels. And
Crazy.
now we have to really be careful about how we're defining uh, a torpor bout, because torpor
Yes, that's my
bouts,
question because that's
right?
like what reptiles do, right?
Right, because reptiles undergo dormancy. See,
Oh,
that's where there's a difference. Now, here's
okay.
here's why there's a difference. Reptiles, for example, go into their cave or their burrow, and they will drop their body temperature, and you will not see them again until March or April, and their body temperature remains the whole time at low temperature. Now, it has to be above freezing, otherwise they'd be dead. So
Right.
they're picking a cave or hibernacula where where their temperature will of that hibernacula, the ambient temperature will stay above freezing, but they will stay in that cave the whole time, and their body temperature stays low that whole time. Okay, whereas let's just first take the marmot, and then we'll go to some other species. The marmot will will go down underground, and it will stop eating, and it will allow its body temperature to drop near to freezing. So if the ambient temperature is like -5 or so, uh, they try to pick a burrow where the temperature of the burrow will stay above zero. So they try to find a burrow, good burrow that's insulated well enough that they won't freeze to death. But they will let their body temperature drop down to near freezing, minus 1 degree, 2 degrees, etc. But every 2 to 3 weeks, they arouse. They come back up to euthermic body temperature, all the way back up to 37 degrees Celsius, okay, or 98.6 if you're thinking in Celsius in Fahrenheit. So the animal every week, 2 weeks or so, arouses and comes back up to euthermic body temperature. Does it come above ground? No, it stays in its burrow. He stays in his burrow. I don't know, reads the book, finishes a few chapters of the book he was reading or whatever, fixes up his burrow, but they don't eat. They don't store food in it. At least the marmot doesn't store food. And then they, after about anywhere from 10 to 12 hours or so, they go back down. So you get this going
Interesting.
up, coming down to low temperature, and then going back up to high temperature again every 2 weeks. So the animal is arousing and expending energy to get back up to euthermic temperatures every 2 to 3 weeks. And they do that all winter long for the hibernation season until spring, when all of a sudden they say, hey, it's spring, we want to reproduce, and they maintain a high body temperature like a quote unquote normal rodent for the rest of the summer until early fall. Okay,
So,
whereas
Professor,
whereas
I'm
your
sorry.
snakes never
Yeah.
do that. Okay,
Right.
So, what is the differential between when they're going up to every 2 weeks? I mean, you've got respiration, you've got heartbeat, and then there's excrement. I mean, I suspect that
don't eat. They're not eating.
Yeah,
they're
there's no
not
There's
eating.
no
waste.
no excrement. They do not urinate. They don't produce any excrement. Their heart rate drops from about 200 beats per minute to 1 to 2 beats per minute,
Wow.
Oh, that's barely
Oh my
alive.
god.
barely alive, and their respiration drops to extremely low levels as well. Okay, the respiration drops down to 1 or 2
Breaths per minute?
breaths, and the heart rate, as I say, drops from about 150 all the way down to 2 or 3 beats per minute.
That's insane.
If
That
you
is a
look at
remarkable adaptation. Don't you think
Yeah,
that's
that's crazy.
miraculous?
absolutely remarkable, and that's one of the reasons why it sucked me in for my PhD to study
Of
this, because I
course.
said this is incredible, and the thing is that they do that, and they do that repeatedly
Right.
all winter long. Okay, they're going from 200 beats per minute down to 2 beats per minute. And if you show a physician the EEG and the
Oh,
heart
that's gotta be scary.
rate, they think the animal's dead.
Yeah.
Okay,
So
but it's not.
is
It's
the
perfect.
cycle time very consistent in terms of the up and the down? Is
And
it?
what is the purpose of cycling? Is that like the making sure all the parts still work, like booting up a computer, making sure it still works? Okay, back down.
Well, okay, so to try to answer both questions. Okay, so yes, the periodic torpor bouts, we call them, where they go down and then stay down and then come back up again. Those appear to be very regular. Uh,
Hmm.
how they're timed, we don't have a solid answer. In fact, nobody knows what causes the arousal. We still don't know what actually
Oh,
causes the arousal.
okay.
People have speculated, like you were just saying, Ellie, that they need to arouse to get their physiology back in order again, or
Mhm.
to get their brains working properly, or to pee, or to get rid of metabolic waste or
Oh,
whatever.
sure. Yeah.
But they haven't eaten anything.
Right.
Okay, um, but all of those suggestions, all those hypotheses, have not answered the question.
Interesting.
They've been tested and they don't answer the question that why the animals arouse. So we still don't know. We call it the mystery of the arousal. We don't know why they arouse. Now,
Very
having
interesting.
said that, there are a lot of other rodents that show multi-day torpor bouts. That is, they go up and down every day,
Oh my God.
depending upon food availability and depending upon their hormone levels, depending upon what's going on with them. So the marmot is one of the extreme ones. And people
Yeah.
then will ask me, well, what about bears? Do they really hibernate? Yes, they do. In fact, bears definitely drop their body temperature. Now, you can imagine a 300-pound, 400-pound bear. Can it store enough fat to bring its body temperature up from, say, 5 degrees Celsius all the way back up to 37 degrees multiple times during the
Oh
winter?
yeah.
The answer is no.
Yeah, I just guess no.
So we ask the question, what do bears do?
Right.
Well, bears allow their body temperature to drop about 6 to 8 degrees Celsius. So maybe
Mm.
coming down from 37 down to 28 or so.
Mhm. Mhm.
And that's enough of a metabolic savings, along with dropping its heart rate and its respiration down to very low levels. That's enough of a metabolic savings that the bear can survive on its fat for the whole winter. No problems.
Mhm.
Remember, female bears give birth during winter.
Wow.
And
Oh, that's
so
right.
their body temperature stays relatively high, but they
Sure.
still are metabolically depressed. They still drop their metabolism, they drop their body temperature only a few degrees, but that's enough of a metabolic savings that they can survive on that mass of fat that they have during the winter. Whereas these guys can go all the way down to close to zero, and
Right.
they have enough fat on them
That's a
that they
miracle.
can they can do it several
Yeah,
times
multiple
throughout
times,
the
that's
winter.
crazy, like,
So,
even I mean, even
so
doing it once is crazy, but then,
yeah.
like, repeating that every 2 weeks on such
Right.
a
So
consistent
so you
basis.
ask the question. You ask the question also. So what's the purpose of this? Why are they doing this? Well, the purpose is to survive a period when there's low temperature and
Mhm.
no food.
Mm.
That
Okay.
makes sense.
So
Yeah.
you're in an environment where your food supply has dried up and gone away, and the temperatures are very cold. Well, what are the things that you can do? You can you can die, which a lot of insects do.
Yeah, that's always an option,
Yeah.
yes.
Yep, yeah, you
You
can
can
die.
party.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
You can migrate,
Yeah.
which a lot of animals do.
Right.
Right.
Okay. Birds, for example, will
Yeah.
migrate from cold areas to warm areas. Okay. And third, you can tough it out like badgers,
Yeah,
skunks,
or like Wolverines.
raccoons, wolverines. You can tough it out and you can still drop your body temperature a little bit and get sort of lethargic, but and that allows you to make it through the winter, but you can scavenge and look for stuff under the snow and like that. And the fourth possibility is to hibernate, to find a safe shelter spot and drop your body temperature to very low levels, and you have really no significant metabolic needs, and you periodically arouse. We don't know why to euthermic temperatures, as if to make sure you keep yourself going, and then you drop it again, and you do that through the whole period until spring comes. And then once spring comes, you've got food, you've got warmer temperatures, you're back in business. So
That leads me to my next question. What is the cue that spring is here? Is it temperature? Is it amount of daylight? Is it just their
uh,
body? Is it something that they get a phone call and say, "Wake up"?
right, right. Well, the cue is basically that hibernation is a circannual rhythm. That
Oh,
is a yearly rhythm where this goes on. If you put the animal in a cueless environment, i.e., no light, constant temperature, etc., they will still undergo these torpor bouts during the proper time of year, i.e., during the winter time. Now, how do we know that? Because a guy named David E. Davis, a long time ago, he took woodchucks, your eastern kissing cousin of the marmot. He took woodchucks and he shipped them to Australia. Now, by all rights, if it was photoperiodically timed or
Yeah.
temperature timed, the animals should have adopted the Australian photoperiod
Right.
and environment
Right.
within 1 year. Within
Yeah.
one
Right.
year, they
Right.
should have then adopted it. Instead, it took 4.5 to almost 5 years before the woodchucks shifted their hibernation to the Australian winter
Right.
and,
That's
and
that's
summer cycle.
that's
Okay,
very interesting.
so we now know that uh, light and temperature,
Yeah.
they do affect the timing of the
Sure.
circadian rhythm,
Uh-huh.
okay, but they are not the ultimate cue that causes it. They can affect the rhythm and change the rhythm, and this is why global warming, temperature change,
Yeah.
is really affecting these guys right now because if they can't find a place that's cold, they can't hibernate.
Yes.
And yet their physiology tells them this is the time of year I'm supposed to not eat.
Yeah.
Well, if I don't eat and it's warm, my metabolism goes up higher. I lose my body fat faster. I'm out of luck. There's nothing to eat. I die sooner.
Wow, that's amazing. Well, I've got two questions that relate to this. We have spoken to a lot of people in the animal world that do stuff with the Department of Defense and Department of Energy, um, trying to
True.
replicate natural behavior and engineer this. So, has the Department of Defense talked to you about survival for humans in cold climates or anything like that?
Yeah.
In fact, DARPA uh, did did approach a bunch of us who study hibernation and asked, what can we do to, put a human into hibernation, so to speak. Okay,
Austin Powers.
right, exactly. And the interesting point was that they were very interested in it for at least one of the following reasons, and the biggest reason was apparently when a soldier or a marine or whatever, soldier gets shot, you have what's called the golden hour,
Yes,
Right.
which is
right.
right, which is the hour that you've got to do something to him
Yeah,
to help him survive. If you can do something in that first hour, the human has a really good chance of survival. Well, one of the things that they were really excited about is if we can lower a human's body
Oh,
temperature to
yeah.
very to low
slow down
levels,
circulation. Sure.
exactly. That's
Right.
that
If your heart's
decreases the
beating
circulation, that saves the tissues, that
right.
saves everything, and it would probably save the human's life
Yeah.
because they wouldn't bleed out as
Right.
Right.
fast. The
And
metabolism
potentially
would
the
drop
limb
lower.
too.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So DARPA was really interested in, is there something about the blood or whatever of hibernating animal that we could inject, do an injection, and then the human starts to cool down
Yeah.
Right.
and everything. So that got worked on for several years, and some of us, when I say some of us, I mean others in the hibernation field,
Yeah.
since we all knew about this. Others in the hibernation field got money from the military, from DARPA and other places to study that. And so far, we've not produced the miracle drug that would
Right.
lower your body
I
temperature.
think it's an ice
Now,
bath, is what it is.
right, exactly. An ice bath is really what it is.
Yeah.
And now, having said that, my advisor, Heller, he actually studied yogis in India, and they were able to lower their body temperature naturally by themselves. And he tried to study that for a while, but that didn't pan out. But um, there are people that can lower their body temperature naturally, and it allows them to not only survive but eat
Yeah.
less and have
Well,
a little.
what do they call those divers that go down without a tank? You know,
Free divers.
they slow
Right,
them. They have
exactly.
to slow themselves down somehow.
Right, exactly. They also decrease their heart rate, decrease their respiration, and are able to survive. And so it is possible that
Yeah,
in the distant future we might be able to uh, have a situation where we can either give somebody a drug or whatever that helps them to lower their metabolism and lower their heart rate,
yeah,
respiration, etc., to be able to survive and not eat and be able to survive a time of stress. I mean, that's what we're
right.
talking about is of
Sure.
severe stress. Right.
When the in the period of hibernation, when you said they're going through the cycle of waking back up, or what did you call it, topper? Is that
Arousal.
Arousal is when they come back up again.
yeah?
Right.
Is the going from 1 beat per minute to their normal heart rate? Is that cycle time the same as the down cycle, or is it a different cycle time up versus down?
Interesting. Uh, when they start to go into hibernation, start to go down, their heart rate and their respiration drop very quickly
Yeah.
and drop very quickly, and their body temperature is basically governing their metabolism as they drop it and they go further down. Now, we have recent data evidence to suggest that they can suppress their metabolism. So, in other words, if you keep your metabolism up high, you can't lower your body temperature. You're producing heat.
Ah, right, right.
Okay.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
so what we have found is that marmots and bears in particular, the way that they're able to uh, get their body temperature down so quickly is that they suppress their metabolism.
Hmm.
That's a really good question and a good research topic is to find out how do they suppress their metabolism. We
Right.
don't know what the mechanism is exactly that allows them to suppress their metabolism. And hence, once they do that, body temperature falls naturally.
Yeah.
Okay. Body temperature will fall naturally. And so that's what you get. And that's what I actually showed in my thesis work, excuse me, is that the set temperature for metabolism drops very quickly and in a not quite stepwise manner, but in a nice slow sort of uh, um, exponential manner as it
Mhm.
goes down, so
Mhm.
that the animals generation of heat doesn't happen because
Hmm.
they're below they're above the set temperature. So long as the set temperature is below, they won't produce any heat.
Right.
Okay, so it's like the thermostat of a house. If you
Yeah.
keep turning down the thermostat of a house, well, it's not going to heat up because if it's cold outside and it's losing heat, and
Right.
that's what happens with these guys. Now the arousal is a different story. We find that when they're going back up during the arousal, the set temperature goes up very quickly. So in
Uh-huh.
other words, it goes up above body temperature. So the animal all of a sudden perceives that I'm very cold and I need to hurry up and heat myself up again.
Ah.
And the first mechanisms to heat themselves up are the brown fat. They have what's called brown fat,
Hmm.
which internally in their axillary areas and interscapular areas, that warms their blood. It has an uncoupling protein in it, which uncouples oxidative phosphorylation from respiration. And so as they start uh, using the brown fat, instead of making ATP, it just makes heat. So this brown fat tissue just makes a lot of heat and warms up their blood until usually around 15 to 16 degrees Celsius. And then you see the animals start to actually physically shiver. And then they start shivering as well. And as they shiver, their muscles are producing heat along
Right.
with the brown fat. And that brings their body temperature back up to these normal levels.
Hmm.
So that's how they actually arouse. But as they go down, they make sure that their body temperature is above set point, and so they don't they're below set point, so they don't produce heat. They don't produce any heat.
Wow.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Absolutely amazing.
Now
Who knew?
the other interesting point with these guys is that remember to hibernate, you got to get fat. They're
Right.
Yeah.
using fat to be able to burn, to produce the energy for these arousals and
Right.
coming out of hibernation. Well, I asked the question, if they get fat, why don't they get diabetes?
Yeah,
Why,
no,
Yeah.
why
absolutely.
don't they
It's
get
just 'cause there's
insulin
such a short
resistance?
amount of time, right? Like, I mean, they're just
Exactly.
packing it on in like a couple months.
That's right. They're
It
packing it
might be
on.
the type of fat as well.
Exactly. And the type of
Oh,
fat is also crucial that they're putting
okay.
on.
Yeah.
And what myself and others discovered was that they do prefer the essential fatty acids, and they
Ah, okay.
produce a lot of fat and feed extensively on plants that have fairly high levels, relatively high levels of essential fatty acids. And the animals get fat. And then once they're at a particular body mass and body weight, the animals look at the food in their cage and say, no, thank you. I'm good. I don't need to eat anymore. And they
Yeah.
stop eating
They're self-regulating.
and
Yeah.
self regulating. And when they are at that point, that's when they should be diabetic. But they don't become diabetic
Here,
because
you know
they
why
stop eating.
they're not eating seed oil, number
That's
one.
right.
Number two, they're not eating hydrogenated oil or
That's right.
partially hydrogenated oil or margarine. They're eating natural fat, which is
But
good for humans as well. I'm not a nutritionist, don't get me wrong. But that all that seed oil and hydrogenated oil are killing us.
that's right. Exactly. And that's why in the national parks, they tell people, please do not feed the animals because
Yes,
marmots would love to have some Cheetos. They would love
I'm
to
sure.
have those,
Yeah.
but those are not good for them, and they do
Right.
not help them to hibernate.
They're not
Exactly.
good for us either. Let's put it that way. We're
That's
not,
right.
we're not that different. we're
That's right. But it's nice that these guys, they get so fat, their insulin levels, their fatty levels, everything look just like an obese human. And
Wow.
so we ask ourselves, why don't they have frank diabetes? And in fact, it's because they stop eating. Now, why do they stop eating? That's the $64,000 question. I worked on that for a long time, and I would love to still dearly work on it now with all the new technologies that we have. But that clearly is one of the answers to a lot of human problems. Is if we could figure out what is the signal or molecules or whatever combination that turn off the appetite for these animals, because they and many other hibernators completely stop eating during that 7 month period. And you, I mean, you can put food
I
in
can
front
tell you what it isn't. It isn't Ozempic, that's for sure.
of them. Exactly, exactly. So
So I have a question that's not maybe it's not
Wait, no,
technical enough
first,
for you,
hold on.
but
Are you a fan of Fat Bear Week? Have you heard of Fat Bear Week?
no, I haven't heard of fat.
Oh, so it's basically it's these bears that are tracked. I think I don't know if it's Denali, some national park, and they every year there's a Fat Bear Week contest, and people will go online and vote which bear got the fattest, before they go hybrid. I think it's like in September and October, but it's just something kind of fun online. You can see these really fat bears.
yeah, they're eating salmon, natural
Right,
fats and
Yes,
good
we get it.
fats.
Natural fats. Yes, thank you.
right,
So
right.
when they go get Punxsutawney Phil, are they going down the hole and pulling him out? Or I mean, they may not. He doesn't cycle on Groundhog's Day,
No,
so
no, exactly. They go and they pull him out of his burrow their artificial burrow that they've made for him. And I always get um, put on the news on Groundhog Day here in Colorado. Nine News has done a number of stories on me
Yes.
because I always am a little bit chagrined about Punxsutawney Phil
yeah,
because of
isn't
the
it
fact
bad for them to disrupt his
Hey, so
natural
you're saying
that
he's
cycle?
sleeping?
they're
I mean, why are we
that's right.
yanking him out of his hole?
Exactly. They're disrupting his hibernation cycle, and obviously on February 2nd, no marmot in his right mind would come above ground to see if it's going to be
Yes.
if it's going to be a long winter or a short winter. Um, marmots here in Colorado are under 10 feet of snow on February 2nd, and so they're not arousing to check out the weather. Now,
Right.
Punxsutawney Phil on the other hand, or woodchucks, and particularly because of, again, the climate's been warming, they will occasionally come up above ground and look and see what's going on, because in the east, end of February can be the start of spring.
Right.
So
Yeah, but you can get a snowstorm in April too, or May.
Yeah, that's true.
exactly, you can
Yeah.
still get. That's right. And the thing that also gets to me is that if you count the days from February 2nd to March 21st, which is the first day of spring, it's always 6 weeks. It's always six
True.
weeks.
Yes.
So yeah, there's always going to be 6 more weeks of something, and therefore, um, Punxsutawney Phil is usually not the best predictor of what the weather is going to be. And as I said, my fellow marmots here, they would never come above ground in February to check out whether there's
Of
going to be
course.
6 more weeks of winter or whatever.
Well,
So
That
who
explains
started this
no, that
craziness?
well,
Was
no,
it
that
a,
explains why he always looks so pissed off, because, like, he never looks
yes.
happy. He always looks like, "God damn it, you these people in these
You're
suits and
waking
these
me
guys
up.
pulling me out
and
again."
that was a German folklore. That the
That's where it came
Oh,
from. I
that
thought it,
explains it.
okay.
German folklore, yeah, and it was because when the Germans came to the United States and they saw this uh, rodent. Well, they saw it was a rodent. They didn't know it was a rodent. They thought it was a badger, actually.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Come above ground. They thought this was a predictor of the weather, and it, of course, has turned into a big brouhaha with the Punxsutawney Phil and everything. But they've mistaken the groundhog for a badger coming above ground, and having some mystical powers to be able to predict when winter was going to end, or how hard winter was going to be. So, yeah, that's where that goes back to.
Well, they
So
have a healthy diet. I'm reading here, where am I? I'm on A to Z animals.com, and it's telling me
yes,
what
good.
the,
Read the expert about from our
yeah,
website. That's perfect.
marmot
Great.
diet: flowers, berries, leaves, grasshoppers, fruits, seeds, stems,
Oh, so
grass
they're
roots, bird eggs.
omnivorous then.
That's right. Marmots in the wild have a very, very healthy diet. They definitely go after plants that are high in essential fatty acids, polyunsaturated fatty acids. They
Ah, okay.
love nuts and seeds, etc. And they will occasionally get some protein if an animal gets hit along the roadside. They'll go and they'll actually gnaw on Johnny that got
Roadkill.
hit by a car. But
Yeah.
Really
yeah, they will. But they,
interesting.
in general, are herbivores,
Yes.
and pretty strict herbivores at that point, and they they feed on plants that are high in the unsaturates, which helps them to keep their body fat fluid
Mhm.
on themselves as well. So they don't eat a lot of saturated fats. And the fats that they do make are monounsaturated fats as well as polyunsaturated fats.
Interesting. So how
It says
wait,
something
I have
here
a
that
question. No, my turn, my
go
turn.
ahead.
How disruptive is I mean, obviously it's disruptive to poor Puxatawny Phil. Is he able to then go back into his slumbers, quote unquote, or is he just like, "You ruined it. I'm done. Now I'm awake." Like, how does it
Well, depending upon how cold it is, yes, Punxsutawney could go back into hibernation again if they left him alone and left him in a nice dark little burrow that he has, for his hibernaculum. He could go back into hibernation, but my guess is that after he's been poked and prodded and pulled out, that he probably doesn't want to go back into hibernation again. He starts looking around for food.
Yeah.
Whereas if I wake up one of our Colorado marmots, the
Mhm.
yellow-bellied marmots, uh, in the middle of winter in February, and prod him and wake him up, he'll say, why did somebody wake me up? I'm
Right.
going back to sleep again, and they'll go right back down into
Oh,
hibernation,
interesting.
and they won't come out again because of this circadian rhythm.
Sure.
They won't come back out until March or April.
Oh, wow. That is crazy. So yeah, so tell us about your little stuffed friend over there.
Well, as I said, this was baby, and he went through a fair number of experiments, but he also did a very nice job of educating school kids about hibernation and and debunking some of the myths about
Sure.
hibernation. And it was a nice way to be able to, and nice visual as well as tactile way to show
Sure.
them how cold an animal could get when they stop, they reduce their heart rate, reduce their breathing, etc., and they're not producing any heat. They become as cold as a rock, basically,
Right.
close to the environment. And then they can produce heat internally. That's the thing. They can produce the heat internally to warm themselves up. Whereas a snake undergoes dormancy and has
Right.
to wait until the environment temperature, the air
Right. Thaws
temperature
it
warms
out.
up, right, before they can start moving around again and get going again. So
Interesting.
um, but he actually did a number of insulin experiments with me as well, of showing how his insulin levels changed through the course of the year, and along with his fat mass changes, to uh, basically document that they became insulin resistant, and he had high insulin levels until he stopped eating in the fall, and then would start hibernating. And that's the other point that I should make, is that all in our all of our discussions so far, we've assumed that the animal is in a cold environment. In other words, either
Right.
outside in the cold or in a cold room
Right.
if they're in captivity. Now, the question people will sometimes ask me was, well, what happens if the environment warms up or you keep them in a warm room? Do they still hibernate? Well, yes, they do try to hibernate, but
Okay.
obviously they don't have a compressor in their body, so they
Right.
can't go below ambient temperature.
Oh, sure. Okay. Yeah. So
So
they.
they lower their body temperature to as low as they can go. But if you keep a marmot in a cold room that's at 5 degrees or zero, he hibernates great. Normally, deep,
Right.
long bouts of torpor, etc. If you raise the ambient temperature of the cold room up to about 15 degrees, then he can only drop his body temperature down to about 20 degrees
Right.
Celsius. And he cycles faster because his
Oh,
metabolism is
sure.
higher. So he cycles faster, his torpor bouts are shorter, and then they do come out in February because he's burned up all of his fat.
Right. Right. No, that
He's
makes
burned up
sense.
all of his fat because his metabolism has been higher because he's been at a higher ambient temperature. And so
Oh.
you can see, if they come out sooner, the plants haven't evolved
Right.
to come
What are
out
you gonna go
sooner.
eat?
There's nothing to eat. Okay,
Mm,
so this is the problem with global warming, and
sure.
warming, particularly in areas like for the marmot, where they are assuming that they will be in sync with the timing of plants coming above ground and the food supply being available.
Oh, wow. Now, yeah, that's something I didn't even think about. So, was he kind of like was baby kind of a pet? Was he like in your house running around, or did he have a little
Well,
marmot crate?
no, no, he had to stay in the lab.
Okay.
He did stay in the lab, but he would come and jump on you and sit on your shoulder.
Oh,
He was a real, I mean, a pet like that. So he would sit on your shoulder, and he uh, watched what you did and everything. And so we let him roam around a little bit in the cold room. We gave him kind of free reign and
sure.
didn't actually keep him in a cage in his latter years.
Right.
When he got to be about 8, 9 years old, uh, we didn't do experiments on him anymore.
Hmm.
And so we gave him a lot of straw and grass and hay, and let him just make his own burrow in the cold room when it came to be wintertime. And he would make his own burrow. And I have pictures of his burrow and everything that he made.
Oh,
And he would hibernate in the cold room. Uh, Whereas the other animals had to be in a cage because they
right.
were wild, but
Right.
he could just be sort of out naturally doing what he wanted to do, and
Oh,
so
wow.
it was pretty nice to let him uh, do things naturally. And unfortunately, I mean, he died in hibernation, which is what
Oh,
most marmots do. They
interesting.
eventually they get old and they don't put on enough fat, and they
Sure.
eventually go to sleep and they don't wake up, and that's
Oh, wow.
that's what happens to a lot of hibernating rodents, is that they eventually get old enough that they are not putting on the amount of fat that they need to survive. And the winter may also be a lot harder
Sure.
that particular year, and that is what uh, gives kills them basically.
Interesting. So what's
Well,
their
that
lifespan in the wild then? I gather baby probably lived a little bit longer than his cousins in the wild.
That's right. The lifespan of marmots in the wild is usually between 6 and 8 years.
Okay.
So he lived a lot longer. Now, having said that, there was one female marmot that I trapped up in Gothic, Colorado, up in in the mountains here, and it had a air tag that I didn't recognize, and it had been air tagged by a colleague of mine, Ken Armitage. And when I gave him the air tag number, he said, "That's amazing. This animal is 22 years old."
wow,
And
Whoa.
it was a
wow,
female that had a spectacular burrow. The burrow was really perfectly located so that predators couldn't get in. It was protected from wind and weather and everything. And she obviously had a long life, but that's the rarity. That was the rarity.
That's crazy. Yeah,
wow.
that I'm sure he was like, "You're messing with me. Like, you didn't find this thing, or you found the
Right,
ear
right.
tag, like, out
Yeah, yeah,
somewhere."
right. It
Wow.
was amazing when I trapped this female, and she had lived for 22 years.
Now, did she look old? Like, as far as
Oh,
marmots
oh
go,
yeah.
she looked like she'd aged?
Yeah. Well, uh, men and women turn gray and
Right.
white. You can see that this guy, he, if he, I don't know if I can get the lighting
Oh,
right,
he's
but
cute.
yeah, his muzzle
Oh, he
gets
does have a little
whitish.
yeah, a little
Right.
sugar-faced.
Yeah, yeah. His muzzle gets very white. So you can tell an old marmot because their muzzle gets quite gray and white around the
like
nose.
like this one.
Yeah,
You
So
know,
what preys
me
on them?
too.
And
That's
are they
right. Me
preyed
too.
upon during hibernation? I'm assuming that's probably motivation to, like, find a good den is, like, also so you don't get preyed upon, but what does eat them or go after them?
Coyotes, golden eagles, foxes will go after the babies.
Oh,
Weasels will go after the babies. Martins will go after younger ones.
martins.
But
Yes.
it's mostly golden eagles and coyotes, and bears will dig them out during the
Oh, okay.
winter. They find their burrows, will dig them out. So they have a fair number of predators.
Yeah,
So
sounds like it. And then how many offspring do they typically have?
usually, female marmot in her prime will
Mhm.
maybe have between 6 and 8 pups. We call them
Oh,
pups.
okay.
Below ground, they're usually the gestation period is about 28 to 32 days,
Oh,
somewhere
that's
in that
short.
range. The pups stay below ground with the mom. They're usually born. The matings can occur below ground most of the time. Sometimes they occur above ground, but matings are mostly below ground. Pups are born sometime the first or second week of May, and then they don't. They're born, but they don't come above ground until usually the second week or so of June or later. Uh,
Mhm.
and Of the 6 to 8 that are born, usually a litter of 4 would be considered a big litter that would
Oh,
come above
wow.
ground. So not all of them make it,
Right.
um, but usually 3 to 4 is the norm that would come above ground and start feeding. And again, their task is to get up to 1 kilogram, 2.2 pounds. They've got to get up to 1 kilogram to be able to survive the coming winter. And the pups, interestingly, that first year spend the year in the burrow in the winter with their mom. So they
Oh, okay.
hibernate with mom the first year. Second
Interesting.
year, they then might hibernate with mom or might find their own burrow at that point in time. But the juveniles uh, usually stay with the den with that mom and on that territory up until 3 years old. At 3 years old, the mom and dad usually say it's time to go make your way in the world
Right.
and kick them
go
out.
get your own den.
That's
Right.
right. Exactly.
Oh, wow, so
Exactly.
that's a long
Well,
time
then
with them.
becomes a competition for matings and competition
Sure.
for food, etc.
Well, this has been fascinating, and who knew about this hibernation? There's just the learning so much about the how that marmot body goes through the cycles. That's phenomenal.
So do
And
they make that crazy scream? Like I'm sure you've seen that video of that groundhog that's like, it kind of it looks like they're in Colorado. She's standing on someone's porch and he's just screaming. Is that their noise that they make? Is that
Yeah, they
natural?
make a very high pitched scream, and that usually is to try to scare off predators.
I mean, it
Exactly.
is scary because it's like it just seems like you would not expect that type of a sound to come out of something like that.
Yeah, that's right. They have a very high pitched squeal that they use to scare off predators and to uh, you know get people's attention and to warn other marmots in the area that there may be a predator. And they have different squeals and calls, as they're
Oh,
called,
interesting.
for different predators, whether it be a golden eagle. There's a call for aerial predators. There's a call for a fox or a coyote that will be walking on the ground. They have a different call for that. So that way the marmots know where to look. So I look up, so I look down,
Right.
or whatever. So
Oh, wow. That's interesting. So are they solitary? So like when they're not with their little babies, are they solitary throughout most of the time or
the ones in Colorado and California, the yellow-bellied marmots, they are all uh, uh, social. They're social groups surrounded by usually a dominant male, and then a number of usually could be one or two females uh,
okay.
in the on the territory, and the woodchuck, however, is solitary. The males will mate with females and then they leave, and they tend to be solitary at that point in
Interesting.
time. But the
Interesting.
alpine marmot in Europe hibernates in groups of 50. Yeah, my colleague Walter Arnold has studied them extensively, and they will have a huge hibernaculum, and they might have up to 50 animals in one den. And the
They don't
same is
overheat with all them together. I mean, I guess since they're lowering their body temperature, but still like
yeah, but yeah, they put the babies in the middle
mhm,
of all the adults, and it's very cold there, and so they're hibernating and they keep each other warm, and they're synchronized in terms of their arousals and their entrance into hibernation. Same is true for the marmot up in the Arctic, Brauerei, the marmot up in Alaska. It also hibernates in big burrows with a large number of animals. So
interesting.
they get together.
Oh,
So
wow.
all the different species have adopted uh, the different kind of social behavior
Sure.
and physiology depending upon the environment that they're in.
Sure. Sure.
well, we may have to have you back
Like
for
Darwin's
round two
finches
because
almost.
who knew marmots were so fascinating? And now I understand why you went into marmots because there's still a lot to be gleaned from this wonderful animal.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
thank you
Has
very,
the
very
clothing
much.
company sponsored you yet?
Well, Marmot did sponsor me. I thought they did sponsor me for about 2 years, and I wish I don't have it on me, but next time if we do this again, I'll wear my
Absolutely.
Marmot
We will.
clothing. I've
Yes,
got Marmot
please.
clothing, Marmot tents, all kinds of
Excellent.
Marmot
Good.
paraphernalia
I'm
because
glad they sponsored you.
they did sponsor me for about 2 years when I was a graduate student and
That's
a
awesome.
beginning professor. Yeah,
That
Excellent.
is awesome. That was my yeah, that was a
Well,
question I
thank you
had.
very, very much for your
Yes, thank
time.
you so
It
much,
was
Dr. Reed. We
very
will definitely have to
informative,
have
very
you back on.
fascinating how nature uh, created this adaptation for marmots. We
And
we
then
need
wait,
to.
really quick, because I mean, they basically get on the verge of like being like they're pre-diabetic essentially. And that doesn't damage their kidneys or pancreas. They have no, wow.
it's absolutely phenomenal. I mean, it's really something that we should be studying. And remember, they use the woodchuck to understand hepatitis and
Oh, did
hepatitis
they
C.
really?
Yeah,
How does, okay, explain
the
that
wood,
one to us really quick.
that's a whole nother interesting story. But the woodchucks that were housed at Cornell, a guy named Concannon, and folks down at Penn in Pennsylvania, they use woodchucks to work out hepatitis C, and
Wow.
and why these animals didn't get hepatitis, etc. So,
That's insane. Oh yeah, we'll have to have you come
so
back
Yeah,
on and
that's
tell us
part
the
two.
hepatitis. Yeah,
That's
that'll be part
That's
two.
the
Yeah,
teaser.
because I would need to. I want to
Yeah,
know more
I want
about
to
that.
find out about that.
there
That's
are
insane.
a lot of medical implications here. A lot of
Yeah.
things that we could learn
Oh,
from these guys.
absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, especially like reversing prediabetes, like, because unfortunately you still can have damage to your organs regardless if you get out of that range or not. There's still some lingering effects. But thank you so much for your
Well,
time,
thank you,
Dr. Gray. We're
Professor.
gonna
We
have to
do
definitely
appreciate your
have you
time.
come back for this
Yes,
hepatitis and woodchuck thing. Have
right.
that highlighted right now.
Absolutely. Part two.
Yeah.
All
Thank you
right.
so much.
Thanks.
And
All
as
righty.
always,
Well, we
and yeah,
both say our goodbyes, and
yes,
it
bye
was
to
good
baby.
to see
Thank you,
you
baby.
guys.
All right, thank
All
you
Okay.
right.
again.
Bye bye.
Okay.
Bye
Bye
bye.
bye.